For almost a century, the United States has dominated the global stage. Following World War II, it built a massive global sphere of influence, and following the collapse of the USSR, it had a decades-long period of being the world's sole superpower. But that era is already fading. The world is shifting toward multipolarity, with new powers rising and old alliances being called into question. Still, there is a difference between the US becoming just one of several global powers and it collapsing into outright irrelevance. So that begs the question, what if the US actually collapsed? Let me preface this by saying I don't think the US is facing imminent collapse, but I do think it's facing a major internal crisis that could hypothetically lead to it, if we're being pessimistic. Whatever you may think of Trump's unitary executive philosophy, or the decision to send asylum seekers and seemingly political dissidents to forced labor camps in El Salvador without the ability to defend themselves in court, it's pretty blatantly against the US Constitution. There's not much of an argument to the contrary. Without a day in court, the state could theoretically arrest anyone, even citizens, because how would the accused prove they're citizens if they never get to speak before a judge? These actions are creating a constitutional crisis. The courts, even the Supreme Court, keep ruling them illegal, and then Trump ignores it and moves on to the next thing. His administration pushes through wave after wave of unlawful policies, overwhelming the legal system, and making the United States increasingly authoritarian. Most likely there will be some kind of resolution, legal, political, or both. Maybe this is just the direction the US is heading in, or maybe pressure builds after a Democratic win in the midterms. Trump could be forced to change course or step down if his actions become unpopular enough. But let's be pessimistic. What if there is no resolution and this just continues? Imagine the Trump administration drastically ramps up deportations and starts going after swaths of political dissidents, including citizens. Then imagine a governor in a blue state calls up the National Guard and refuses to let federal agents illegally deport their residents without due process. Trump retaliates, asking the governor of a nearby red state to send in their National Guard, or maybe even deploys federal forces directly, like during desegregation in the South. Suddenly, it's a standoff between the state and federal power. This could very well be how another US Civil War starts. Let's say the crisis deepens. Congress finally sees the need to take action. Trump and Vance are impeached, even removed legally speaking, but Trump refuses to step down. Congress splits. Some members flee and set up a government in exile, as Trump remains in Washington. Parts of the military fracture. Some units stay loyal to the constitutional government in exile, others to the man still calling himself president. The US descends into a chaotic, multi-sided civil war. Markets crash, the dollar tanks, US military bases abroad go dark, allies panic, and the West's political rivals see opportunity. Before moving on, consider checking out the new revamped membership perks like early access to videos and mentions at the end of videos. This is a small channel, so any support is much appreciated. China obviously stands to benefit quite a lot from the collapse of the United States. As the dollar crashes, the RMB rises as one of the most dominant world reserve currencies, but unlike the dollar system, there is no single reserve currency in this world, and the RMB's use becomes deeply political. States aligned with China hold reserves in RMB, ones that aren't in euros. The main factor which kept China from taking Taiwan, as it has wished to do since the ROC forces fled to the island at the de facto end of the Civil War, has always been the US presence in the Pacific. Without it, the only potential check to Chinese power in the region is a block of regional powers, South Korea, Japan, India, Australia, and others. Together, they have the potential to challenge China militarily, but that would require a decade of military buildup. This makes the immediate aftermath of the US collapse the best opportunity China will ever have to take Taiwan, and they might not even need to invade. As American forces withdraw to deal with their own civil war, China, now uncontested at sea, imposes a blockade on Taiwan. Cut off from food and supplies, and with no relief in sight, Taiwan is forced to capitulate without a single shot being fired. For the following decade and a half, China expands its global reach. The acquisition of Taiwan greatly increases China's power globally, as it becomes by far the most dominant chip manufacturing hub in the world. Through the Belt and Road Initiative economic partners, and strategic allies like Iran and Pakistan, it builds a cohesive military bloc, a network of allies. But this doesn't go unopposed. In Asia, an anti-China alliance takes shape, led by India, Japan, and Australia. The Indo-Pacific Alliance evolves into a mutual defense pact aimed at containing Chinese expansion. Naval cooperation ramps up, and Japan and Australia invest heavily in rearmament. While not as dominant as the old US-led alliance system, this new bloc acts as a regional counterweight, one that China cannot ignore, and one that prevents China from gaining complete hegemony in Asia. With the collapse of the United States, NATO is effectively over, and what remains of the West is the European Union and a handful of regional powers. With this massive immediate power vacuum, the federal EU is no longer just a thought experiment, it becomes a necessity. I've made videos about a strong, more interconnected EU, which is a possibility in real life, but not guaranteed. But this scenario almost guarantees a federal EU. A weakened West tempts Russia. Putin sees an opportunity and makes this move, launching a campaign to seize the Suwalki Gap, cut the Baltic states off from the rest of Europe. At the same time, Serbia invades Kosovo, hoping the European order is too paralyzed to react. It's a coordinated test to see if Europe will fracture, and as with China and Taiwan, probably the best opportunity Russia will ever get at taking back its old sphere of influence. This may seem like a stupid move to an outsider, but for Putin, it's now or never. But the Franco-German-led European alliance responds with full force. Russia's advance stalls, Serbia's gamble fails completely. European forces assist Kosovo, and as fighting spills into proper Serbian territory, the public turns on the government and topples it. The fall of Serbia sends shockwaves across Russia-friendly regimes. Hungary and Slovakia quickly fall in line. The message is clear, as you now don't just get a finger whacked at you in the European Parliament or funds withheld, but face outright military conflict. The war with Russia comes to a close as European forces push out the Russians, and even capture some territory, but stop short of any deep invasion into Russian heartland. Nuclear weapons have changed the rules. The days of total war between superpowers like in World War II are over. You can't completely defeat or occupy a nuclear-armed state without risking nuclear annihilation, but that doesn't mean you can't win, as Russia is unable to deal with the united European bloc and forced to sign a peace deal. The war breaks the gridlock in European integration very rapidly. With no time for debate, the EU pushes through full NATO-like military integration and a federal state made up of its core members. The speed at which things have to happen result in a tiered EU approach, as the core members form a true federation almost overnight. The rest of the Union remains partially integrated and continues a more gradual approach. The third layer is added, with associate members and allies that loosely join the common market at a more limited capacity and remain highly autonomous. The European Federation and European Union become the new leaders of the Western world. As the dust settles, two dominant powers emerge, the European Union leading what remains of the West, and China, with its growing sphere of influence across Asia, Africa, and beyond. India and Japan lead a third bloc, but it's less unified, a loose network of regional powers. It's strategically important in its region, but not a cohesive superpower. This is the new reality, a multipolar world with two powers ahead of the rest, and likely a now very divided North America, which becomes a strategic battleground. What follows isn't the new Cold War, it's messier than that. Countries are more pragmatic. Europe and China compete economically in Africa, and eventually in Russia, whose vast resources, doomed demographics, and fragile regime make it ripe for the picking. Ideologically, Europe aligns more closely with the Japan-India bloc. Strategically, it doesn't have as many qualms with China as the US did. There's a whole continent in between them, plenty of common enemies, and without the US to enforce a binary world order, Europe doesn't have to pick a side. But that's about all for now. A big thank you to members Polanska, Woolykins, and Packers105 for supporting the channel. And if you also want to be mentioned at the end of videos or get other membership perks like early access to videos, consider joining. This is a small channel, so any support is much appreciated. Also, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more content like this in the future. See you next time.